This episode brought to you by BRE Promotions. Whether you're just starting out or evolving your brand, BRE Promotions offers you expertly crafted disruptions that'll take you to the next level. BRE Promotions. We make your business shine. Visit us at brepromotions.com to schedule your free consultation.
I'm Dan Shaw. I'm the Vortex Detective, and you're listening to Inside the Goblin Universe.
Influences of environmental factors on one stimulus. Use of both sensory data and prior knowledge to reach enlightenment. The doorway, connecting body, mind, spirit, space, and time. These are the portals of perception.
Hello again, folks, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Goblin Universe. I am one of your hosts. My name is Ronald Murphy.
I'm Brian Bowden, the other host, and it's a great show. We're starting a new era right here, Ron, right? I mean,
It is. We're going down another path, if you will.
Yes, we had a lot of discussion when we started doing the show again, and we wanted to change things up because not everything falls into certain, one generic category. So one of the things that we wanted to trust and play around with is something called, how people perceive things. And Portals of Preception came up, and this is the first ever episode of Portals of Perception on Inside the Goblin Universe and how we view things and how we perceive information. Many times you'll see one person will see an elephant and the other person will not see the elephant. It's
right.
Just, we're just going to try to bring you interesting ways of looking and perceiving.
Right. Yeah, it's not only about Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or the cryptids, or UFOs. It's that gray area, that in-between area, that blur, if you will. I think on this show we're going to explore the liminal zones more than any other time in our radio history.
Right. And, we just think it's different because too many people are getting stuck in this funnel of paranormal.
It's a rut.
It really
rut.
is.
But,
and you kind of can pull things out of everything you see. I mean, even, for example, the Bigfoot Sasquatch. Many people, you can have 10 people staring at the same piece of woods. 3 people are seeing this thing, and the other people are just seeing trees. So, again, it's how you perceive things. It's how you perceive life. It's how you can change your viewpoint and actually open your eyes to more of a way of thinking and seeing. We're not going to get too crazy spiritual,
right.
But it's in there.
No, I think that's a very valid point. It not only changes your outlook, but whenever your outlook changes, your health changes, and the world around you truly does change. I'm a big believer in the idea that thoughts can actually, shift other people's thoughts, whether it's negative or positive. And one of the reasons why we decided to start this show today is with a guest that we have on. I mean, really, if you think about it, this show probably would not have taken off the ground for at least a couple more months. But when our next guest, whenever we found out that he was available to do an interview, we thought now was the time to have him as our premier guest on Inside the Goblin Universe's Portals of Perception.
Yes, and I agree with you 100%. And when we made contact with him, I was ecstatic. And we'll go into why I was ecstatic before, not just because he's a great guy, but let's introduce, he's known as the Vortex Detective.
That's a cool name, too.
Yes, it is. I mean, come on.
It would look good on a shirt.
The Vortex Detective, yes.
That's right.
TV series, the whole lot.
I would get a badge made. And whenever I would go to conferences and they asked me who I was, I'm the Vortex Detective, ladies.
Right. So so we're going to introduce this gentleman, and you may have seen him on a Decoded program. That's what I did for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Shaw. Dan, welcome to Inside the Goblin Universe and the first episode of Portals of Perception.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, it was when I got, we were exchanging an email, and when I got this, and I'm like, okay, I know this name. Where do I know this name from? And then I went to your website, which Vortex Maps, and I didn't get to Dan Shaw first, and I saw the episode you were on Decoded, and I'm like, oh my God, he's the reason why I have this, folks. This lovely little thing is the Golden Vortex that was used on that episode. And we're going to put a link in here to Dan's website as well as to where this video is. And, talk to Dan, maybe get him a couple of these. You can pick a couple of them up through Dan. But Dan, welcome to the program. And I don't want to give away all the secrets, but how did you get involved and become a Vortex detective or in this crazy field?
Well, what you're asking for there is kind of the prequel of how I get involved in the field. It's not really the question of vortexes, because I didn't get into vortexes first. I didn't fall into a vortex and come out and decide that I'm gonna spend my life studying vortexes. Mm-hmm. But there was a sequence of events, and one of those events did include a UFO turning on its lights for me.
That's
below the horizon, very close.
Our friend Brian here, he's had quite a few experiences on these things.
I can't attribute that to a vortex per se, which for me, a vortex definition is a paranormal place, a place that enhances and contributes to psychic phenomena. So I can't attribute the UFO experience that I had to vortex, but I can definitely point to it as being one of the seminal events in my life that led me down this path of portals of perception, of seeing beyond what was immediately visible, let's say. Always kind of looking for that portal to open up again. Looking for...
Let me stop you right there, because I do want to ask you a question about this. Whenever you saw the UFO, was it your intention to see such a thing?
Not at all. Not at all. Although, well, I can't say it was consciously, but I had turned off all the lights. I was out in my backyard. I was in my childhood home. I was 14 years old or so, and I was watching the night sky. And at that era, you didn't see too many satellites crossing the night sky. So I was watching the stars, and I was watching for the occasional satellite. So I was sky watching, but I wasn't necessarily. I didn't think I was looking for UFOs consciously.
No, it was probably like a incredible vista that you have where you were less lighting, and you're like, wow, look at this amazing world that we have. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, there it is. You're like, oh my God, my life's just changed.
But you know what, Brian? What I find so rather odd about this, and also there's a bit of synchronicity to this as well too. We interviewed Chris Evers a couple years ago, and he had a story that falls in line almost exactly. He was in his childhood home as well, just looking out the window, if you can remember, Brian.
Yep.
So it's something about this sense of place. Whenever you talk about a vortex being, one of these kind of paranormal, portals, or whatever, can a portal, in your opinion, be conjured? Not in the typical, witchcraft way that you would think of, but can it be something that can be opened up with intention?
Well, yes, and yes, I would definitely agree to that. There's my premise has several parts, and one is that there's these places that have some kind of an energy. Now, this energy, I don't want to be too quick to define it as electromagnetic energy. That's the first place I looked. I don't want to define it or limit it to electromagnetic energy, but there are places with some kind of an energy, maybe a more subtle psychic energy, I don't know. But there are places which contribute to paranormal phenomenon. The veil between worlds is thin, the Goblin universe, so to speak, right? So, but there's also this idea of the man-made vortex, and hence the book that I wrote, which is called Stonehenge Gardening Tips, which talks about being aware of the energies of the earth, just as we're aware of the subtle energy channels of the body, the acupuncture meridians and points and such, in order to manipulate those or to work with those subtle energies, the way the energy moves, the channels of energy, for our health and healing, our psychic opening, our physical immortality, and our ascension.
Yeah, the Sacred Gardening, I read it at one sitting. I recommend it to anybody out there. It's just really is a great read. It opens up your mind to these kind of things. Now, in my opinion, I've always been a believer that the Earth is an organic living object. The whole Gaia theory has been something that I've been espoused to since probably my mid-20s. Do you follow that same type of rationale as well?
I go even farther than that, in that I'm an alchemist.
Okay.
So that I believe that everything is divine, conscious God. So there's not only are we conscious beings who are divine, but even the stones are conscious, and they are part of what is divine, which is everything, and of course the earth itself is a divine conscious organism, also undergoing its own ascension process.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I mean, how many alchemists do you meet in your lifetime? And I don't mean that in and it's, we did one of the things that blew me away, and this is a couple of episodes back, the Hermunculus, was I just was on YouTube, and all of a sudden this thing came up, and then I just started watching more. I'm like, these people are crazy, but this is a possibility. And so I'm not going to go, but the different alchemy is the fact that the earth and every living thing, or every cell, has some kind of energy. We're connected, pretty much. Am I on the right path with that type of philosophy?
Well, maybe I should have said I'm a student of alchemy.
Right.
I'm a teacher of alchemy. But
I'm bringing over a whole bunch of lead and base materials, man.
Yeah.
It's for me, alchemy is broader than this the stereotypical idea of working with metals and turning lead into gold, but it's a broader thing. It's about our self-perfection, physical immortality, and our ascension, our expansion out into everything, our dropping of all physical limitations, and our completion as sentient beings, our ascension. So geomancy, for me, it's a subset of alchemy. So to answer your question then, I would state, I'd kick it up a notch, what you said there, which is we're not separate. In fact, let's take it to this point. Our energy field, our aura, you could say, is not separate from the physical energy field of the Earth, the geophysical field, and our energy field are one. It's not like a handshake relationship. It's a relationship of unity.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And the world would be a lot different place if everybody thought that way, And I think at the basis of every religion, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's Hindu or Muslim or even the philosophies of Buddhism, this interconnectivity is really a hallmark of everything, isn't it? That we are we all came from this divine breath that was kind of blown out in this one, miraculous instant, and we're all part of that oneness, that being.
There's a mystic thread in every tradition, of course, and what we're talking about is mysticism and this direct connection to the divine. And for me, my path has been about the connection to place, and how every place has a unique energy to it, has a unique personality, character, and a unique electromagnetic signature, I would even say. And since we're electromagnetic beings, by exposing ourselves to these fluctuating, varying electromagnetic fields, I believe that we're activating our chakra system. It's a kind of chakra activation, and that as we move around from place to place, that it has the potential to open up our psychic abilities, to heal us physically as well, and also the reciprocal, also that we can heal the earth by our presence and by ceremony and love.
Right, beautiful way to look at it, my friend. That's absolutely gorgeous, and I hope you write that up pretty soon, because I think that would really make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. The idea about we are consumers, not by nature, but by culture, I think, more than anything. We start building up walls. We see something as, that we can use. All these great tracts of forests are gone. If you look at the world as, the rainforest is our lungs, we're choking ourselves to death. And I think that we really need to come around and think that, everything that we do negative to this planet, we are actually doing it negative to ourselves as well.
And quick question regarding the book, The Stonehenge Gardening. One of the things I liked about it was you gave some good background on history and electromagnetic type of information, the science part of it, but then you also put another section in there to say this is how you can do it in your home. Now, one of the things about we'd all like to be better people, and we wish the world was a better place. But you know what? I think it's the energy and the circus. Like the circus of life. Actually, that's a great idea, circus of life. But we have the positive ions and the negative ions. There's always a positive and a negative. It's the yin yang, and it's balance. And as much as there's a lot of people that want this utopian society. I gotta be honest, I think it'd be boring as hell. If everybody was so nice to everybody, it was like part of going to a higher plane and reaching a higher level is coming out of the norm most of the time. If you want to look at it, when you grow up, your parents are always they're smarter than you, and then you break through that ceiling and you accelerate past them. So what role does this positive and negative, and let's go with ions, play in reference to the Stonehenge area, and how does that have an adverse effect on the other Stonehenges or henges that are around the area? Could they be batteries? Could they be? I've always said, and I'm going a little bit long, but Ron and I have had discussion after discussion. I believe these stone circles and chambers are portals or the equivalent of Grand Central Station. And recently I told Ron about it in the movie about Kid Knight or something like that. They actually use Stonehenge to transport from Stonehenge all the way across the country. And it was a little bit campy, but I believe that these were places where you could do that. So if you can address some of that, I know it's a little bit deeper, but that's one of the things that I was picking up.
Okay, wow. Thanks for asking. Let me unpack that just a little bit. I put together a little booklet called Stonehenge Gardening Tips, and I'd like to offer that to your listeners for free. If they will email me, then I will send them a free copy of Stonehenge Gardening Tips.
I'll tell you what, listeners, I'm telling you, people listening to this, watching this, do yourself a favor. What is that email?
Oh, ask at danshaw.com.
Ask and you shall receive.
And we're going to put that up.
Thanks. Sure.
As well.
The subtitles explains better the intent of the book, using earth energies in your garden. So I'm using Stonehenge as kind of the prototypical earthwork, really.
Right.
It's true that the word henge, actually refers to the earthwork ring and ditch around the stone, and Stonehenge is just one henge of thousands around the UK and Europe and no doubt around the world. And it's not even the most impressive one, but they do come in all sizes. These essentially, it's a ring and ditch, but they're generally interrupted. In other words, it's not a complete circle. So we have this feature, which is this henge. We have Stonehenge, and the premise of the book is that these earthworks manipulate the geophysical energies, the earth energies, the electromagnetism, etc., and perhaps the more finer, subtle energies as well. And that by understanding how to work with these forces, that we can actually enhance the life force of cells, living cells, ourselves, our animals, and of plants. So that's the premise of Stonehenge Gardening Tips. So again, I'll send free copy to any of your listeners who send me an email. So that's for starts. And then, so to talk about yin yang, this is a kind of a beautiful example of what I was referring to, because we know this idea of duality or polarity, it is across all mystic traditions. You could think of it as an alchemical principle where you have the yin and yang, these complementarities. And so we can apply this in alchemy and all its various schools. So geomancy, we see this as well. And we see it in optics, and we see it in electricity as well. And so the electricity makes a great analogy for what we see in the earth. Where we find currents of energy, we often find energy flowing through essentially two electrodes, a positive electrode and a negative electrode. So on the landscape, we actually see, let's say, Mount Shasta, California, which is a volcano which in itself has certain specific electromagnetic properties we could go into. And then we see nearby another little cone, a cinder cone called Black Butte. And so on a psychic, you could say psychic or subtle energy level, or even a gross physical level, we might expect to see currents running between the yin and the yang, these two electrodes, Mount Shasta and nearby Black Butte, both in the air and then at the ground level, and then below the ground, there might be these currents of energy flowing between these polar complements. Do you want to ask a follow-up question on that?
No,
that was great.
I think it makes sense. Yeah, and now to bring this around, we talked at the very intro. We also talked about the idea of ritual, and on these certain locations, like a place of Stonehenge or these other sites, we do have ancient traditions of human ritual in those cases, and the unfortunate event as well too. But as it happens, even with the burning of Notre Dame, that too would be considered one of these sacred sites that might possibly be located on this particular land grid.
Also true. And there was a third part to your question, actually, which I could get back to, which was this idea of traveling along the lines. Mm-hmm. So it is right. True. It is, of course, true that you can have a UFO sighting or a Bigfoot sighting, let's say, or ghosts anywhere. But I would argue that these occurrences, these sightings, are more likely at vortexes and along ley lines.
Right. And we're talking about naturally occurring. See, I think that's really what I want to get out to our listeners and to our viewers. We're talking about things that are actually based in principle in science. Like when we're not making up some sort of fabrication. Right. Like if you would look at places like, I'm in Western Pennsylvania, a lot of Bigfoot sightings here, a lot of UFO sightings that extend into parts of Ohio, West Virginia. And then when we talk about like the Mothman, this is all part of the Appalachian Plateau. You know, we're talking about a very geological area, and for some reason, really strange things happen along this area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and one of the things that I just find fascinating about the vortexes, and when you actually were on Decoded way back when, they were doing a whole thing about Alaska and the many missing from Alaska. And what most people don't realize is, although how beautiful Alaska is, it is like almost like one gigantic vortex. Am I correct to say that a majority of that state is just anything technically could happen because of the energy created from these vortexes in that area? I'm not going to attribute all the missing to that, but I'm talking about, you know, aircraft going down, Bermuda Triangle-esque type of effects. And when you have a vortex, there's a possibility of electromagnetic radiation and playing on electronics. So, I mean, one of the things that and I love about this is because I want to know more about vortexes. I've read about them. I've been to certain places. How do you transition from the UFO alchemy to, you know, getting into the vortex? Where did that first like pop up? Because I think our listeners would like to know that, like how this is the breadcrumb trail right here. Because part of Portals of Preception is you start at one place, and then the next thing you know, you're traveling down the proverbial rabbit hole but everything starts to make sense. A equals B equals C equals D, and it keeps going. So if you could take us down how you got to that area and how you got to the mathematics of it too, because it's very interesting in this book that you will get for free. I'm just going to point right there. Just send the email to Dan. He's going to send it to you. He references one of my heroes, which is Nikola Tesla, and 369, and how that plays a role in a lot of what we're doing here tonight, right?
Okay.
I know it's a lot, but I'm just saying, if you can get into vortexes themselves. Sorry, Ron, but
wow. Okay. Well, I still want to back up. I want to back up actually all the way to time travel along the way line.
No problem. Okay, back up.
Okay. So you were mentioning this movie.
I think it's called Kid Knight.
Kid Knight.
I believe it's Kid Knight or Night Kid or the kid that would be king or something, or King Knight, or I don't remember the name. I'm going to look it up while we're doing this.
It would be king, maybe. Anyway,
Kid would be king. I think that's it.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
Because it had that whole Arthurian legend.
Yeah, I like it.
Guinevere, all that other stuff.
Sure. Okay, so where I was going with this was that psychic abilities, psychic events can happen anywhere, of course. But at these certain points, which seem to be geometric points around the Earth, yes, and the lines connecting them, that's in general what we're talking about. We're talking about there's a planetary system we call the Earth grid, which is highly geometric. There's other patterns and systems as well, besides, for sure. But at any of these energetic points, let's say, these are excellent places for people to practice their psychic abilities. So that's just, I want a seed I want to put out there. Okay, so then now in regards to Alaska, if I could say, anybody pick up a magnetic map of Alaska can see that the magnetic map of Alaska is pretty impressive with everything going on there with one plate, the oceanic plate, subducting under another. Mount McKinley, of course, all the other volcanoes going on, that volcanic arc of islands. There's a lot of electromagnetic stuff going on. And again, I don't want to take away any of the mystery and reduce it and say, it's not, I'm not going to propose that vortexes are only electromagnetic, because there's this kind of miraculous, magical part about vortexes and about creating vortexes with our human intention as well. But there does seem to be something to what you said about Alaska being essentially one huge vortex. And I hold that these vortexes, they're essentially everywhere, in that I think of them as being an anomaly in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. Now, in our everyday life, we might not give a lot of attention to the electromagnetic field unless maybe there's a lightning storm or something. But we exist in this dynamic, churning electromagnetic sea, really, that's impacting us every moment, whether we're conscious of it or not. We, as humans, do have the potential to sense these electromagnetic fields, I believe, because of the in our brains, in every cell, we have a minute amount of magnetite, which is a magnetic mineral, and also in our sinuses, or you could say in our third eye, we have a greater amount of magnetite. So there's this potential mechanism for humans to actually have magnetoreception or sense magnetic fields. So these, where as we move across the Earth and over time, these magnetic fields impact us. Their impact is fluctuating, and essentially at the boundaries, let's say, as the field changes, we could say we tend to sense how these energies, those of us who are sensitive to these energies, we can sense, or certainly if we can't sense it, we're still impacted by these energies surrounding us, these electromagnetic and other kinds of energies. So that still doesn't quite bring us to, I think, the last part of your question, which is kind of how I came along all this way. And I can say with certainty that it has to do with kind of a divine intervention in my life, and how this gift of these, essentially these geomantic maps came to me. Actually, there's a couple maps, the Earth Star Globe being one, and another which I call Earth Star North America. Now, these were just gifted to me, I didn't create them, but I published them, and that I became a hub for information online at vortexmaps.com for one about visionary maps, which the subject of visionary maps is actually somewhat broader than just vortex maps. I'm particularly interested in these maps that have a geometric component to them, that are showing maybe triangles of various kinds, equilateral triangles, or maybe other kinds of triangles. Maybe they're showing circles or patterns of circles, such as like overlapping circles, like Vesica Pisces. Maybe they are showing 5 or 6 pointed stars, these geometric maps. But there's other kinds of visionary maps as well. There's maps that are anthropomorphic maps, you could say, or zoomorphic maps that where people are seeing faces or human figures or animal figures in the landscape.
Right.
These are a different kind of visionary map, which can, in a certain sense, I mean, it can be a very effective kind of magical geomantic tool in connecting to your place and working with the landscape. Lines, there's essentially, ley lines are rifle straight lines of sacred points, essentially. So there's other kinds of visionary maps, but I tend to focus on these geometries of points, and we could go down that road if you like about why triangles.
Well, definitely, because when we can't help but think of, when I think of vortexes, one story that comes to me is about this gentleman who was traveling from the Bahamas to Miami, and I believe it's an hour flight, and of course he's going to hit Bermuda Triangle area there, and he radios in and says there's some kind of purple fog going on, or something's going on here, and the next thing you know, he's in Miami. We're talking 15 minutes. He just took off from the Bahamas, was traveling through, and in 15 minutes he was landing at Miami Airport. It's impossible to do. Well, let me rephrase that. To our current thought, it's impossible to do. But if you have a vortex, why not? And and as you state on your maps, or these maps that you have on that you actually gave us one of those. These little triangular areas, these little spots, your map is, I wish I had it present right now. It is filled with triangles and specific shapes for the specific areas there. Does that triangle, like in Egypt, play a role in enhancing the vortex, or maybe even just holding it enough to allow transportation?
Yeah. Could it be considered sacred architecture or some sort of symbol to say, here be portals?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that for me? I didn't quite catch it on Skype.
Okay, so
just that last bit.
Go ahead, Ryan, what you were saying.
From what I said.
I
I was wondering if triangles acted as a sacred architecture, or if it was some sort of a symbol that simply related to people around that particular area, that here be vortexes.
Okay. Okay. Let's go there for sure. So I think the incident that you're describing, Brian, is you're describing Bruce Gernon. In his experience flying, he had you would say a time slip. It was kind of the opposite of lost time, and that's a very credible account. Bruce spells his last name, I think, Guernon, where he actually flew effectively. It sounds like through a vortex. He describes it very much as a spiraling tunnel, and he talks about the purple fog, and that's a very credible firsthand account. He's accessible, humble guy, so that's a great testimonial for the books for sure. I can't say that I've had that kind of experience at all, but where you're thinking of a vortex, certainly it's entirely possible from my standpoint that you can time travel or teleport, because from the standpoint of alchemy, there is no separation, none whatsoever, no separation, full stop. Any perception of separation in space or time is just part of the illusion. So when we reach that kind of enlightened consciousness, then it's possible to see the past, future, change the past and future, travel there.
And do you think, actually, I had a conversation with somebody that said nothing's faster than the speed of light, and he replied back, the speed of thought. It is faster than the speed of light. How much does that play and that perception play on your experience or with vortexes? I'm assuming it's just this area that is a collection of, and it could come ebb and flow of energies that create the vortex. They come and then they go away. They dissipate, and then that's why you can't. It's if we could track these things specifically, like the Bermuda Triangle as an example, I'm sure that if you had some of the weather apps out there, you'd see, and there's a big vortex in the Bermuda Triangle area today, but it doesn't work that way. It's I don't know if it's a time-based thing where every 12 hours, every 54 minutes,
like a geyser
right,
or something.
Yeah,
Well, an interesting point. Does it happen by happenstance? Or does it need some sort of catalyst to open? Like, could a human being act as a catalyst if they're linked into a certain type of magnetic wave? See, that's the thing that fascinates me. As I study the paranormal, I say something like, certain people seem to be a paranormal Wi-Fi, hotspot. Things seem to be attracted to them. They go out, they see things all the time, whether it be ghosts or cryptids. And as I research more and more, I'm starting to come under the impression that we might be dealing with almost synchronicity, that things have to happen in conjunction with one another for these kind of things to occur and to open.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Let me just back up again. You guys are pretty. You're two teaming me, double teaming
sorry.
me.
We'll slow down. We'll slow down. I promise.
Well, as tag team wrestlers, that's what we used to do back in the day.
Tag me in, Ron. Tag me in.
What's your stage names there? So, but let's go back for just a moment to the triangles thing, because that is kind of. I find it an exciting method of working with the energies, actually. So. We could use an acoustic analogy in that if I were to take 3 bells, let's say, and put them in an equilateral triangle and ring these bells at the same time, that might set up an interesting kind of a standing wave pattern. If you could visualize, if you could see these acoustic waves, it would form a very regular or stable pattern. So I use this analogy, this acoustic analogy of the stable waveform for suggesting that these vortexes, when they're arranged in equilateral triangles, let's say, it's almost as though they are broadcasting towers, and that if you have 2 in a row, let's say, well, any 2 are in a row, you might have a waveform which can reinforce and cancel each other out and form interesting patterns, etc. But if you have 3 in an equilateral triangle, then you might have a more stable waveform. So I'll just kind of leave that there on the table for the moment. I wanted to make sure that I touched on that. But then now to go further, I love you guys. You're talking about these essentially like time-based triggers or synchronicity-based triggers or maybe human-caused triggers. So I would say a number of things in that regard. Okay, so when we're looking at a vortex, if we think of a vortex as a spiral, then we're simply just looking at a cross-section of that vortex. But if we were to look at it in full, glorious 3 dimensions, we might find that it is some kind of a toroidal structure, and we're just looking at like a cross-section of a torus or a donut shape. Okay, that's a possibility. It might be 3-dimensional. Of course, it could be even more dimensions, and what we're actually seeing is like a shearing force of electromagnetic energy that's like shearing off like the jet stream of some 4th dimension. Right? So it may be that there's certain time-based cycles, like maybe it has to do with the pattern of the moon. As the moon orbits around the Earth, the actual center of mass of the Earth is orbiting around inside of the Earth. And so when you measure gravity in the X, Y, and Z axis, now you can see that throughout the day, the center of gravity is actually orbiting around inside of the Earth. So maybe that's involved somehow, right? But then maybe it's Earth, Sun, Moon, maybe there's other planets involved, possibly. These would be timing, as you're calling it. But think about these cross sections now as they interact. You may have two that are interacting like cogs on a wheel, where they're turning in counter-rotating motion, where at the edges they're turning, I'll say congruently or together, yeah? So, but you may have two counter-rotating, where they come together, these two spiraling vortexes. Now, if we're thinking of them in those terms, if they're counter-rotating against each other, now you've got some very dynamic shear forces going on, and now you bring in a human being who has their own electromagnetic field. That may be enough to send them in a certain time. That may be enough to kind of send them through on a one-way trip.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking is that as we as beings are become more aware of it and the ability and can vibrate, believe it or not, vibrating yourself, vibrating at a higher frequency. I just think that we have the possibility, and there's my little phone numbers there, but we have a possibility of triggering what we need to trigger in this sequence to transport. Now, one of the things that was interesting is there's a fellow researcher, and she has her own show, and I'm going to introduce you to her down there, Kat Ward, and she had a guest on. He was doing his doctorate. He went to, it was the last day. All he had to do was hand in his paper, and he walked in. I think it was in Wisconsin. I'm not sure. He walked into the area where he had to go, this building, and got in the elevator, and everything was he was just happier than anything. I mean, he even stated, he goes, I've never been this happy. It was awesome. I'm done. I'm finished. Here comes the real world. And when he went in there, he literally traveled in time. And he traveled back to time he saw, and he interacted with the beings that were there. Now, whether he was back in time, physical time, like time, or actually a point that still exists, even though we're existing right now, he was there. He did get help to get out of there. But he said it was one of the most unusual experiences of his life. And how did that happen? How was he able to open this portal? And I said privately to Kat, I said, this guy was unaware of the fact that because when you're happy and you just feel great, you vibrate at a different frequency than anybody else. And this is what we're talking about, portals of perception. When you vibrate at different frequencies, the abilities that you have, the things you can do, are probably limitless.
Right. And let me scaffold off of you, if I could, for a second. What you can do is limitless. I do believe that. But think of a group coming together of the same mind, what they are capable of doing. I just finished writing a book up entitled On Fairies, which will be out pretty soon. And I looked at the acoustics of Stonehenge whenever I wrote this. And, the idea that if you would get chanting voices in there, or even the cadence of a drum, you could actually change the way people, would respond to that. The feeling that one would get from this vibration could physically change somebody's physiology, and way of thinking as well, too. Now, to move forward in time, we're talking about sacred spaces. Pagan rituals were then built upon. The Catholics would take over, and then Christian sites would be put up. So when we think of these fantastic medieval and Gothic, monasteries, basilicas, what have you, churches, it seems to me that they are trying to mimic that same type of acoustics that was known to the ancient world. Now, what is your feeling about that, Mr. Shaw?
Well, I would agree. I would agree entirely that our perfection as physical beings, our mortality and our very ascension has everything to do literally with vibration, and that we're actually living light, and that as we, my focus, as I've said, it's on vortexes, on these energetic spots on the earth, for the reason that, for me, it's a part of the study of alchemy. So I think we can identify points in our neighborhood. People don't have to travel to distant places, but we can actually identify energetic points that are within a day's travel, an easy travel distance, where the energy is different from the surrounding area. You can identify these places. Sometimes it's a mountain peak, sometimes it's a lake. Often it's a park because the area has been recognized for its natural splendor and been preserved in that way. Maybe it's some kind of cultural site. But I'd encourage you and your listeners to visit these places with an awareness and a possibility that the very energies of the earth there can actually physically affect the vibrational frequency of our cells. You could say our chakras or our subtle energy or our aura, and that this can be part of a process, an actual chakra activation towards opening up our psychic abilities and our physical perfection.
Yeah.
Physical perception.
Yeah.
So the sound, the acoustics inside of these sacred spaces, these resonant chambers have been very carefully constructed to harmonic frequencies. And as we go about our day-to-day lives, we expose ourselves to all kinds of very incoherent, dissonant frequencies. So to be in these spaces, whether it's Stonehenge, where the standing stones themselves, the inside of the stones have a concave surface. So this would be an acoustic chamber, even though it's not enclosed.
Right.
Or maybe an ancient long barrow. These are acoustic chambers where if you have smoke in the chamber and you play a drum, you can actually see the smoke in the air will take on these wave patterns. And then on the walls, very often there'll be markings on the wall at these acoustic or resonant spaces in these long chambers. And then the cathedrals, of course, are similar and the same. They're essentially musically tuned spaces. So it is a shame when you bring in folding chairs or something like this, you should not hang ornaments on a harp string. Right. Yeah, but these cathedrals, for example, Chartres, Notre Dame, these kinds of things, they are on these energy lines. Every Sunday, they are being activated with acoustic frequencies, and by being in those spaces, we can help harmonize and make our cells and our brainwaves more coherent.
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful way of looking at things. I had a professor in graduate school. His name was John Hanson, out of the University of Toronto, but I think he has his PhD from the University of London. And he brought up a very, very interesting hypothesis. He said that the great cathedrals of Europe, if you look at them, were actually built to mimic sacred groves. He said, whenever you think of this great vaulting in the ceiling, if you would enter in, it would look almost as if you're being shaded by trees. And if you would go to the water fountains, the holy water fountains, it would like you're visiting the sacred springs once again. So I think there's an interesting aspect to thinking that in order to really find ourselves, we have to return to nature as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our human bodies and trees in particular, we function as antenna for receiving these vibratory frequencies, whether they're the frequencies of the earth or the frequencies of man-made electromagnetic pollution. We're antenna. Based on our proportion, we receive certain waves. Each unique tree species is a certain beautiful fractal antenna and receives a particular frequency. And by being in a grove of trees, let's say, we can absorb these beautiful frequencies of energy from the trees. And with the burning of the roof of the cathedral, I find out that the roof was actually made of giant oaks.
Yep.
And that these oaks were rare in the Middle Ages. Yeah. Hard to replace, yes, but you were actually still in a grove of oak.
Well,
right, they said about 1,000 trees. So think about that. You were in a small forest that was hanging over you. absolutely beautiful whenever you think about it. And then if we think of the Judaic tradition, we think about the cedars of Lebanon. We keep on coming back to the idea of the sacredness of life around us, something that we so soon forget, though.
Right, and one of the things that we also have to point out about both of this, if you're going on the Judaic side as well as the Christian side, as well as in the natural side where all this comes from, the men that helped to build these cathedrals, these tabernacles, used all of this sacred geometry. They used all the sacred symbols and signs and information that what you're talking about, I believe, Dan, in nature, about tones and how the trees resonate and where the sun is hitting. I mean, these are the stonemasons that put it together. They're not the Illuminati; they're masons, and they put them all together, and they were able to harness all this information decades, well in advance of what people can even think of today. And I got to be honest, I'm thoroughly impressed when I see these cathedrals and what people were able to do and how they know to harness the trees or the wood or use the right wood. You get specific with the Ark of the Covenant, where it's specific cupids by cupid. It has to be covered in a specific way. We don't in this day and age. I mean, I think all that stuff would have come from China. Like, oh no, the Ark's coming next week. It's coming on the ship from China.
But they were doing God's work, right? So whenever you open your mind to the divine, very powerful things can happen. That's my take on it. That's my thing. I think one of the greatest keys to open up a vortex is love your neighbor as yourself. I think that's one of the greatest things that you could possibly think of, and I think that can open up all kinds of doors of perception.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. I'll say this then. We're talking about the let's say an oak tree being a very particular shape and vibrating at a very particular frequency, I'll say of its own. But if you think about it, oak trees everywhere are all vibrating at the same frequency. And if you have a piece of quartz crystal, which is relatively pure and vibrates at a very precise kind of frequency, it's vibrating at the same frequency of quartz crystal everywhere on the earth. And as antennas ourselves and as being created in the reflection of the divine and being an aspect and a fragment of the divine, we're vibrating, we have the potential at least to vibrate at the divine frequency. And so hopefully what we're doing by loving, we're opening up our heart, we're opening up our chakras, we're allowing this divine energy to flow freely through our whole body, whether it's a bliss, joy energy, or however we experience it, the Kundalini energy, when we have these loving feelings, we have the potential to transform ourselves and the reality around us completely, and we have the potential really to, I want to say, to complete the spiritual journey and to merge with the divine. And so as we experience our connection to place, we can use that as a tool really for opening up how we experience everything in the world around us, being kind of an erotic, a tantric love relationship with the place and everything around us.
Quick question.
It's some sort of real intrinsic interaction. The imagery that you use, I mean, first of all, having you as a guest, you really paint quite a picture, and I really appreciate that very much so. But I like the idea of this kind of intrinsic, very human emotions that you're talking about here to unleash the powers of the divine. I love that. I love this symbolism and illusion. I think that we could probably go all night with this, Brian.
Oh, you know, this is all part of. There's so much stuff that I want to talk to you about, and we have these windows of, like, you know, our own little vortex windows that we can use, and you know how the pyramid. I mean, I go to Egypt, right, and I've yet to been there, but you know, there's reasons behind the shapes of these temples, the Great Pyramids, and there's definitely some kind of energy being generated internally as well as externally, and there's an ebb and flow between, and it's just it's kind of like having, and I'm gonna get into because I'll just show everybody right now again, the Golden Vortex. I'm gonna see if I can get a light on this too. See if I can get some light on that.
So you want to go another half hour? Okay.
Yep, if it's
Yeah.
all right with you.
No, let me. I'm just gonna back you up a beep though.
Sure.
A click before we go forward in that direction, and I'm just gonna say that when we visit a vortex, when you visit an energetic place, what would you do to connect to that place? And I would say, take off your shoes, walk barefoot if you possibly can, connect physically to the ground
Right.
in that sacred place. I would say, if it's possible, so you could safely drink a little water from the place. You could maybe find a little bit of wild edibles, eat the wild edibles there. Breathe deeply, breathe in the electrical ions in the air. Look at the colors around you, breathe in the colors around you. Be in joy, sing, dance, drum, do whatever kind of ceremony that you do and be there in gratitude to the place. And I'd say leave it cleaner than you found it. And then I would say people sometimes ask me, what is the most powerful vortex in the world? And I sincerely believe that the most powerful vortex in the world is our own heart.
Very interesting. That's,
Love it.
wow.
Love it.
That is
Now-
very, very interesting.
Now, I'd like to hit on a couple other high points
Sure.
to underline things you said. One you said was ebb and flow, and this is, I think, an important concept with regards to vortexes. We can think of Stonehenge, let's say, as kind of the prototypical kind of earthwork, but as a model for earthworks in general. But we can think of Stonehenge as being a place where perhaps acts like something of a filter to the chaotic energy surrounding it, so that inside of this circle, this henge, this ring and ditch, the energies there might be more coherent, having been kind of filtered out. The energies inside the ring, having filtered out the chaotic energies outside of the ring to start. So then, as the energy comes into the ring, the energy might collect and build up until such point as it does discharge. And this is very much like how modern electronics work. So there's this ebb and flow as there is in all creation. Again, it's kind of a principle of, you could say alchemy, but really of any kind of science, is that there's this ebb and flow. There's yin and yang, this building up of energy and then discharging and discharging. Yes, so that's a very beautiful, thanks for asking that question. So then furthermore, you allude to this idea that the shape of the pyramids is somehow involved in the energy. And it's important to understand that shape does have energy. Just as energy has shape,
Right.
shape has energy. So we can work with...
I'm writing that down, by the way. That's great, yeah. Shape has energy. I love that. I've never heard that before. I'm writing it down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So just as the shape of the pyramid generates a certain kind of an energy, the reverse is also true. You can work with shapes. You can work with shapes as a way to affect the energy of the earth. That's kind of what we're doing. And when we're moving the rocks around, we're affecting the energy. So it's nice if we're aware of how we're influencing the energy. Again, if we're extracting minerals, then we're doing damage to the natural energetic field of the earth that we were totally dependent on and connected to. And again, we're only hurting ourselves.
And if we think about like the symbolism of in black magic, such as the pentagram, the pentacle that's actually turned on its, so that all nature is now in a chaotic state of being. I think that we're also tapping into a very ancient knowledge that you can do some pretty bad things if you want to as well, if enough negativity gets together as well.
Well, again, it's the yin yang, that there's always this homeostasis really between the two interacting forces. I'm working on a novel, more or less working title, Paranormal Vortex, about this prequel of how I became the Vortex detective. And when I sat down to write it, what I wrote was essentially all the mountain peaks. Like, yeah, this happened, all the mountain peaks. Now, going back and looking at it, I realized, well, now I've got to fill in the valleys. You know, we've got to have, if we want the peaks, we have to have the valleys.
Right.
Whether it's drama or real life.
Yep, it's the peaks, the valleys, it's the EK machine, EKGs, which is the tape where you have your extreme highs, extreme lows, the middle ground, and then when you go flatline, you're not here anymore. You're dead. Yeah. So that's what life is. But and it's actually a great way to explain visually to somebody life. But what I was intrigued by, getting back to the Vortex, I was actually very intrigued by Vortexes when I first saw you. I mentioned to you on a phone call that we had well before the show. Near me in Purchase, New York, it's been told to me that there are Vortexes there, and it's specifically on the SUNY Purchase, grounds where State University of New York in Purchase is. Now, that doesn't throw me for any type of a loop whatsoever, because if you get to the New England area and New York and just north of there, I mean, they're even in the woods there are all these stone chambers. I've discussed this with Ron at one point.
Oh, sure, sure.
We had Linda Zimmerman on, who did a great book called Stone Chambers. Okay. And she attributes a lot of stuff to the Native Americans building them, and I differ. And I'm going to differ. It's not a fight thing, or not a right or wrong, and it's just a healthy debate. Each of these little chambers are more square than any other type of shape, as opposed to pyramids. But there's such an energy when you walk into these places. One point, what we did was, when we were investigating this one spot, to see what we can get from the vortexes that are reported there, and that are supposedly seen there, my buddy goes out because he forgot his temperature gauge to check the digital thermometer. So what we do is we use an app with singing bowls in it, and I mean, it is about 12 different singing bowls, and each one of these resonates at a different frequency and a different note.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's actually very important. So here I am. I'm holding my phone with my FLIR on it, and I'm videotaping from the back of the room out towards the entrance, or a little bit to the right of the entrance. So you see some of the white light coming in through the FLIR. And then as I start playing around with the singing bowl and the tones start coming out, you start seeing what looks like a purple mist developing right in the center. And then it looks like a ring's coming. And at this point, I'm acknowledging this, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Something's going on here. And it's almost as if something was opened up. I'm not saying it was. I don't know for sure. I've yet to go through that, and experience a real portal opening in front of me. But what do you think about the areas just in North America? Is one area, let's exclude Canada, and let's exclude Alaska, because we know there's a vortex there. What areas are really vortex intense? Is it like the New England area and maybe some part of the mid, or are there too many to mention?
Well, let me answer in this fashion. Vortexes are, to my mind, they're everywhere. We're talking about variations in the electromagnetic field, which is nowhere uniform. Okay? Now, if we look first to electromagnetic fields and geophysical energies, let's say, what we find is that the Earth is made up of quartz crystal, A lot of silicon. Some places it's crystallized. Now we have quartz. Now, where we find granitic rock, that often has quartz in it. What are the electromagnetic properties of quartz? Well, when quartz is under pressure, it gives off an electric charge. That's called piezoelectricity. So quartz is an electromagnetic material. Now, of course, under the ground, it is under pressure. Quartz is under pressure. So we have electrical currents. And we have minerals in the ground, metals. We have moisture in the ground. So many different causes for having electrical currents running through the earth, measurable electrical currents. Now, when we come to these chambers, such as we find throughout North America, these built features, including like balanced rock, where there's a massive rock sitting on some smaller rocks. Okay,
Yes, been there.
where we find often that those are built at places where there's an electrical discontinuity in the soil beneath. In other words, two types of soil coming together beneath, and there's a fault there, but two different types of soil coming together. So now these electrical currents reach essentially a discontinuity. Yes? So
Right.
balanced rock is a good example where they found a monument at a place where there's a natural anomaly in the electromagnetic field. So now if the monuments are actually built of granitic rock and there's quartz in these rocks, and now there's an electrical property of the monument itself. Now, if you apply pressure to the monument, and you can do this with sound, you can apply acoustic stimulation, or it could be heat from the sun. Now you get this other vibratory principle happening there, and that is one way to possibly open up these vortexes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Most of these stone chambers that I was able to see, a lot of them are under the canopy. So I don't know what it was like when they were built. We did have the same chamber that we had this type of experience in. If you go and you look using UV light and night vision glasses, you'd be able to see the back of the wall, and they would look like runic writing on it. We have that as well. But I just find it interesting that these places seem to be covered. They seem to be, surrounded by earthworks or mounds, of physical earth. Whereas if you get out of the New England area and you get to a place that's near and dear to, I know, Ron's heart as well as mine, America's Stonehenge, then Mystery Hill in New Hampshire, it doesn't seem to be, which is odd, doesn't seem to be covered as much. Do you think there's a reason why that may play a little bit more of a significant role in vortexes or strange oddities taking place versus like these little mini ones that are pockmarked across New England?
All right, now you might have to ask me that question twice here, okay?
Sure.
Because I'm gonna start out with, I think, answering part A first.
Sure, no problem.
And that is where we have these stone chambers. There's essentially, we think of them as being of two types. Like balanced rocks, for example, that's all above ground. It's all exposed, right?
Yes.
But the chambers that you're thinking of being, when you say below the canopy, you're meaning like below the forest floor. They're actually like covered with earth, right?
They are covered with earth
So
at this point,
the ones,
yes.
So today, the ones that we see covered and the ones that we see uncovered, I think very hard to determine how they were originally intended and how they were originally built. Were they covered over with time? Were they exposed by erosion? Hard to say. Is there really a difference between what's a long barrow and what's a quoit or a menhir or trilithons or whatever? A little hard to say, in my opinion. So that's, I think that was part A of your question.
That was part A of it.
There is a part B of the question.
Well, part B specifically goes to the Mystery Hill / America's Stonehenge. The significance of this rather large piece of property. There's a lot of speculation. Oh, we did carbon dating. Well, the carbon dating actually goes back well further than they've carbon dated. But it seems like it's I don't want to get alien-esque, but it's almost like a refueling stop it's to be seen from well above where people were seeing it, in my opinion.
We might have to give so your listeners some context there, because
sure.
In New Hampshire, There's a spot which is called America's Stonehenge, which is in something of a ruinous state, having been quarried. But apparently a prehistoric, ancient, mysterious site of standing stones and etc. And one of the most outstanding sites in North America, certainly, and open as a tourist attraction as well.
Right.
And my kitty's meowing, so I'm gonna.
It's all good. My kitties are sleeping.
That was the worst thing that could happen during this interview, right there.
Well,
So,
the cat can get revenge at this point. We've had actually. I was on an interview, and one of the cats kept hitting a cabinet, and the cabinet kept going like this.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, not a problem. This is.
But got to remember, I'm mic'd up. So,
I totally remember you're mic'd up. But this is one of the things that we love about our show and what we can do.
Casual Friday.
It's a casual. It's as if we were.
Everything's Casual Friday.
Yeah, it's an intimate conversation between three friends just talking about some of these theories. I used to do this a lot with a lot of my friends in the UK, but it involved pints of beer. This is less beer right now. It's only Wednesday. Well, for this gentleman, it's fine. I'm going with the orange soda.
Okay, sorry to drink alone. If we can go back to ancient monuments in North America now. Ancient monument is littered with massive monuments. There's Serpent Mound in Ohio and Moundsville. And just ancient monuments all over North America, but
Cahokia is a huge place.
We had to come in and colonize and take over the continent, and we had to destroy these artifacts that showed that these civilizations were civilized, and that we had to think of them as savage and subhuman, so that we could come in and take the land, right? And so, imperialism, and we had to kind of ignore these advanced ancient monuments in North America. But certainly they're to be found everywhere. There's some very interesting ancient monuments in the vicinity, in my vicinity, in the vicinity of Mount Shasta. Are we still all together? Things are switching on my Skype. Nope. We are together.
Okay. I just had it on mute because I was being asked a question from my my side stage over here. So I took it off the camera, but I'm going to let you continue to talk. I'm coming back on in one moment. I just didn't want to interrupt with the flow. That's all.
Okay, I lost audio on you too, Ron. Though
Ron probably went mute, so Ron has to undo his mute button at this point.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of warning, a heads up. It's approaching about 9:30 right now.
Yep.
So I can probably go about 10 more minutes, gentlemen. I know there's a lot more to cover, but then that will take us to about an hour and a half for this program. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a teacher in real life, and tomorrow is my last day before spring or before Easter break. So I am, I got to get up at 5:30 in the morning. So that's my major caveat. But I do want to get into the idea of the stone, but we're going to have to do that another time, because that brings up the whole idea of like the hag stone and the adder stone and stuff like that, which I really want to cover on its own show if we could.
Yes,
so
that would be fantastic.
As we progress, let us try to wrap it up in like 10 minutes so we can have this as a very cohesive show. And then let's schedule another time when we can just simply talk about the piece that has the hole through it. Okay. Because that's ubiquitous in so many cultures around the world.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I could fill 60 minutes about hagstone, but we could definitely start there, touch on that, go from there.
I think it's more than just hagstone, though. I think what we're talking about is, again, we're talking about North American sacred sites. And we're talking about... again, we're going to go back to probably medicine wheels and why the significance of these locations, and maybe just go a little bit deeper into that as far as astronomical, metaphysical type of zones.
I was thinking more along the lines of just talking straight fairies. I was honest to goodness thinking about that.
Fairies are good too.
Because especially when we talk about in the alchemical sense, let's just do a show about the idea of the perception of a fairy world, as it relates to underlying our own world.
Wow. Okay. Well, again, Doors of Perception is good. Interdimensional gateways, cryptic creatures, etc. My focus, of course, very much on vortexes. So fairies is definitely it touches on in that way the Goblin universe, etc. So I'm happy to come back for another session.
Dude. Look, I'll tell you what, Mr. Shaw, what you have been able to do right now in our hour has really been one of those things that is like mind altering. We had a gentleman on the show about a year and a half ago, and the show was very, very good. It was probably a total of about 3 or 4 hours long. It was quite a marathon. But you are enthusiastic in such a way that it becomes very it becomes quite addictive. So I think what we're going to do with this, if it's okay with both of you gentlemen, I think that what we have so far in this episode is the 101 in relation to talking about this world. So the next one, let's go, one upper level class to the 201, and we'll get to more people that are interested in this. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to get a lot of questions and a lot of emails about you coming up, and that will set the stage for what people want us to ask.
If that's all right with you, I don't,
Oh my gosh, I'm just wondering, and what's the next step now? How do we, we're going to get a link, we're going to post the link, we're going to, tease the next episode, we're going to do a strong close.
What we'll
reschedule for 2 weeks from today, or how do you go?
What we normally do is, we can reschedule for a couple weeks from today. That is not a problem whatsoever. We're not talking about months away. We want to, a lot of our viewers, they encompass a wide variety of individual, and some people need a little bit more time to digest certain product, and some people are just get it. It's like life. I know of plenty of listeners of the show, some of our friends, and they literally have discussions about our shows well after, and I find out about this. I'm like, oh, so you guys are actually listening to my program, not ridiculing me. So what I think we want to do is we're going to put this out and out into the ether, into the social media zones, and where we publish on inside the Goblin Universe.podbean.com, and we're going to propose this question that the people are listening here. You've just listened for an hour and a half, basically. Is there something that you just want to wrap your head around? Is there some other question you want to ask Dan to kind of go into details?
Right.
Again, let's go into the details about the vortexes,
right,
and maybe how that plays. It's not only just the energy field, but what does that do to the sight line, the visual energy, the audio energy?
This is all good points. Now, Brian and I have not discussed this beforehand, but I think they'll be all for it. I would like to have you back as what would your feelings be regarding coming back for a show where you set in as one of our co-hosts as well? Brian, what do you think about that? I think that dynamic would be very, very interesting. I don't know if you've ever had any aspirations for podcasting and all the glory that comes with podcasting, but I would love to have you on here as part of our panel and just start picking some people's minds. We're very lucky as a show to get very little negative feedback. I mean, there's a lot of internet trolls out there.
Now you did it.
And the thing is, you'll get every now and then, like saying this guy's a sham and stuff like that. But for the most part, we really have people that have open minds. And I want that to continue going. I think that you have a way about you that's very much like the everyman, except your wealth of knowledge is so vast and encyclopedic. But what I'd like to do is let's have him back for a show, Brian. And then after that, let's try to schedule another A-lister to come on there, and then he'll face a panel of the three of us.
Uh-oh, it's like tag team. Now it's become the Battle Royale. Let's get that wrestling reference going.
I would love to turn the tables, so to speak, and interview you two about vortexes. It's one thing to come on and talk about what I think about vortexes, but part of the way that I do my vortex research is that I talk to folks like you, folks who are in different places, have visited different places, have different psychic abilities, have different knowledge and experience, and so I'd be honored to come back and be some kind of panel co-host, be able to ask the questions and step out of the expert role.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, it being at 9:30 and Brian is a master of editing. Do you want to, Brian, at this point now, bring up what you had just said almost verbatim about, we've had, and also I don't know if it's allergies or what, but my voice is almost completely gone.
It's Easter break. That's what it is, Ron.
I think it's what it is, man. I think it's what it is. But there's only 20 days of school left, so I'll be having plenty of time to do this afterward. But is there any way that you had said, like, look, we really opened up a few doors here. We want to get our listeners involved.
Right.
Because we're planning on having Mr. Shaw back again. Let's do it that way. Let's do a kind of cliffhanger close on this, if that's okay with you gentlemen. And then we'll just reschedule to have you come back, and we'll do one in part two.
Right. And another thing I can suggest to you is what we can do is this. Anytime one of our listeners wants to ask a question of a guest or get in touch with us, it's questions at InsideTheGoblinUniverse.com, or go to InsideTheGoblinUniverse.com, and there's a sheet there where you can actually fill in what you want to say to us, or ask, or make a request, or even ask Dan Shaw any questions. We can get that information, we can get that going, and then what a better idea is to, if it's all right with you, I have no problem about being interviewed. I'd love to be interviewed, and I as they say, Val Kilmer said, I'm your Huckleberry. I mean, I'll answer any questions to come back on. But I have the ability to do something where we can actually stream live to Facebook.
Yeah, I like that idea too.
Like.
Oh, I'd love to. That'd be my first.
And then what we can do at this point is we can actually, let's try to promote this for a couple of weeks and get people on board, because everybody has a busy life, especially the holidays that are around. It's almost the summer, so people's heads are starting to get out of the house and viewing these and listening to these things. Let's try to promote this, and then we'll do a live stream, and this way we can have people come in and ask questions and see.
Fantastic.
It's the same principle. It's just we'll just do it live and we'll stream it to Facebook.
Yeah, well, let's do it that way. So if you want to say all that kind of stuff as a wrap up, that would be great.
That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Will you give me 60 seconds to just respond to your Golden Vortex thing, because you kind of teased it twice?
Yes.
I'll tease it one more time for the upcoming show, if that's okay.
No, definitely.
Okay, all right. So do you want to give me a 3, 2, 1 or?
No, you just keep going. I'm just gonna hold my Golden Vortex.
All right. So.
Now
I'd be surprised if you can't feel that, actually.
I'll get into that in a little bit. The next roll. So I know we have to close soon. Before we close, I just want to make sure that I respond to you. You mentioned the Golden Vortex device, which is a pendant about the size of $50, invented by my friend and co-author Nick Nelson, which I actually demonstrated on the History Channel on Brad Meltzer's Decoded, on his episode about Devil's Triangle, Alaska. And what I showed is that small device, which generally contains a couple of magnets in a certain pattern, that device, the Golden Vortex, which purports to have healing effects, also creates a visual effect. There's actually a visual shrink and grow phenomena that happens around that Golden Vortex. It's a portable vortex. It's like a portable mountaintop. And so I wanted to be sure and respond to that. We can go more into depth on that later. How could you possibly construct an artificial, let's say a man-made vortex out of magnets? Right.
So I just want to throw that in there before we close. So thanks very much, gentlemen, for having me on your show, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'll look forward to our next chat. What do you have in mind?
Well, I cannot wait. It's been an absolute pleasure for us to have you on the show, my friend.
Yes, definitely. The month of May is really crazy right now. I have a niece's graduation. I can't believe she's graduating. Ron and I are going to be both doing conferences. We're going to be doing the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Weekend in what part of PA is that again, Ron?
Farmington, Pennsylvania.
Farmington, PA for 3 days at the end of the month. And then come the 18th, we will be pretty much features there at the New Jersey Para Unity Expo over in Woodbridge, New Jersey. So it's a crazy month, and then I think there's Mother's Day involved in there someplace.
Yeah, and I leave for I leave for a conference to North Carolina tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
safe journeys.
He's got to get his drink on now.
Oh man, I just hope I have a voice.
Well, you know what? We'll send you one of those, sign language individuals to go
Send me
talk.
vibrations, healing vibrations, my friend.
Yes.
If you don't do one of these, I'm going to be trolling you.
Yes,
So do-
yes, you got it. But you know what? I'm going to bring the vortex with us where we go, so you can see it, Ron, and experience it. And then before we go, let's end it like this, and we'll have you back on. We'll do what we just said.
Great.
Where can everybody get in touch with you? Where can they find you? Can they find your books and your products? Because you have a ton of things to promote. So we want to get that promotion done. Dan.
Thanks for asking. I will respond to all emails sent to ask at danshaw.com. My website is vortexmaps.com. When your listeners email me, I'll be glad to send them a free copy of Stonehenge Gardening Tips, which is a downloadable ebook.
Yep.
And I've written a number of other books as well about vortexes, which you can see at vortexmaps.com. And part of the way that I do vortex research is by talking to people all over the world. So I'm delighted to hear from you.
Excellent, my friend.
That is awesome. We're going to post that up on our Facebook pages. We're going to add you to that as well. Inside the Goblin Universe, Portals of Preception. We're on everything. It's insane, and it drives me nuts when I'm going to do this. But I can't thank you enough for coming on the broadcast, and we're coming back. We'll do that streaming thing, as they say. Bless you. Namaste.
A true gentleman, sir. A true gentleman, yes. And until next time, I will be thinking of questions. We'll have our viewers have a plethora of questions, I'm quite sure, especially after getting a hold of your book. And we'll do this again very soon.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for your service.
Well, that's it, folks.
Thank you, my friend.
Hopefully,
Yep.
Ron will not get abducted by Bigfoot this weekend. And we'll have him back.
That's right. So this program will actually go out after I am there, but
Yes.
the day before Easter, I will be at the first ever cryptozoological conference in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. I'll be there with Ken Gerhardt.
Tell
Yeah.
Ken I said hello. He's one of the best out there. And you
I
know
will.
what? I want to wish everybody, no matter whether you're celebrating Easter or Passover, be safe, be happy, enjoy, be thankful.
Good vibrations. Good
Yep.
vibrations.
And send your vibrations out there. Carry that peace and love and all that other stuff with you. And we can make a change.
We can make a change. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This edition of Inside the Goblin Universe's very first Portals of Preception with Mr. Dan Shaw. It's been our pleasure, my friend.
Right back at you.
All right, we'll see you soon, my friend.
Good night, everybody.
There are spirits everywhere, watching, waiting, seeking that opportune time to reveal themselves like no other. They fill our worlds with so much.
Seriously? You didn't just do that. You farted on the promo? What's wrong with you? I thought you were professional. Go away. Go. I got it. Hey everybody, it's Brian Bowden, host of Nobo Boomy, where we explore deep inside the Goblin universe. We have an amazing show that covers the paranormal, conspiracies, music, art, entertainment, trending topics, and so much more. Please join us by subscribing to the show on Podbean at InsideTheGoblinUniverse.podbean.com, on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and everywhere you find podcasts. It's an informative, fun, and overall entertaining good time, and we'll keep the gas to ourselves. Why don't you burp next time? Somebody get me Brian Anderson.
Hey everyone, I'm Kat Ward, host of Paranormal Heart, your monthly paranormal podcast. Join me the last Sunday of every month as I speak to people who share their paranormal experiences. You can follow me on Podbean, YouTube, TuneIn, iTunes, Spotify, and Paranormal Radio.